Dr. and Mrs. Stein, or Mr. and Mrs. Stein, in terms of the context that you might have known him through the years. Regents of the university, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. We are gathered here today to recognize the completion of and to dedicate a facility designed to serve as a center for research and advanced teaching in the sciences related to vision, the Jules Stein Eye Institute. The audience will please rise. Ladies and gentlemen, our national anthem. The audience may be seated. It gives me great pleasure to introduce the members of the Board of Regents of the University of California who are in attendance today. Without their understanding, support, and participation, this building would not have been possible. Please hold your recognition until all of the regents have been introduced. Regent Edwin W. Pauley, Regent John E. Kennedy, Regent William E. Forbes, Regent H.R. Haldeman. Ladies and gentlemen, the members of the board who are here today. The outset of the conceptualization of this enterprise, the Jules Stein Eye Institute, but for that matter, in terms of the continuing conceptualization and creation of this great Center for the Health Sciences here in UCLA, and even beyond that, in terms of the growth and development of this great center of educational and cultural vitality, UCLA itself, and then indeed even beyond that, as architect, chief architect, implementor of the greatest, most productive system of higher education in the world, I would like to present to you a person without which none of this would have been possible, the President of the University of California, Dr. Clark Kerr. Not many years ago, as some of you will recall, this was relative wilderness, this southern part of the campus. There was a kind of a Greek theater and a variety of nooks and crannies, wooded ones that is, which the students of both sexes found useful for a variety of also important reasons. In fewer years than anyone would have thought possible, on this land and in this area, there has been created, still within creation, a great center for the health sciences. The first dean and the first precise educational and intellectual architect of this enterprise is with us today, the retired dean and vice chancellor for health sciences at UCLA, Dr. Stafford Warren. Dr. Warren. Dr. Warren has, to the great good fortune of this university and medical education in this country in general, been succeeded by a distinguished young clinician and scientist whose efforts are already observable and effective. And I would now like to present to you proudly the Dean of the School of Medicine in UCLA, Dr. Sherman Mellenkopf.
Chancellor Murphy, ladies and gentlemen, in a sense, we are here today in response to an old question which was asked in the book of Deuteronomy. What man is there that hath built a new house and hath not dedicated it? We have assembled to dedicate this beautiful building, the Jules Stein Eye Institute. But more importantly, we have assembled to dedicate ourselves to the intellectual goals and the service of mankind which the Jules Stein Eye Institute was erected to sustain. In this fusion of science and medical care, of research and healing, of inquiry and love, we trust to find the glory of these walls and this ground.
This building, as I hope most of you will be able to observe today, is not only a distinguished building, not only has presence and beauty, but it is an enormously functional building and contains within it the most modern kinds of tools and opportunities for the application of techniques to be found in any institute of its kind anywhere in the world. I would suggest that the central figure in guaranteeing that this building will in fact be useful as well as beautiful and productive is the next individual whom I would like to introduce. He is the energetic, sensitive, but always competent head of the Department of Ophthalmology in UCLA and director of the Jules Stein Eye Institute, the intimate co-worker with Dr. Stein in the creation of it, Dr. Bradley R. Strassman. Dr. Strassman.
Chancellor Murphy, Dr. and Mrs. Stein, ladies and gentlemen. Two groups amply represented in the assembly this afternoon should permit themselves to feel the feeling of enjoyment that can come only from knowledge of a task that has been completed and an objective that has been reached. One of these groups consists of the generous contributors and the officers of Research to Prevent Blindness who have acted in concert with the National Institutes of Health and the University of California to create this magnificent institute. Time and again, when the scientific requirements exceeded the anticipated costs, these contributors provided additional funds and the program of the Institute remained intact and complete. The second group encompasses the Institute faculty and staff, the officers and personnel of the university, the designers, the builders, the architects, and the numerous consultants who formed this particular structure. These people developed a broad concept, converted this into a detailed blueprint, and nurtured it through the stages of design and development to its physical reality. The partnership of these two groups has been made possible by the dynamic and energetic leadership of Dr. and Mrs. Stein. They not only enlisted the support of their friends, their family, and their associates, but developed interest in this institute in the foundations and business organizations throughout the nation. Combining unprecedented personal generosity with a consuming insistence on excellence in design, construction, and decor, their immeasurable contribution to this institute has earned the warmest regard and the utmost respect of all who have been associated with this endeavor. Truly, res ipsa loquitur, the thing speaks for itself. Like most that is worthwhile in this world, this institute developed in response to a need a need that is reflected in the fact that during the past 2 decades, the population of this country increased by 1/3, while the blind population increased by 2/3. A need that is further emphasized by the fact that in the general hospitals throughout this nation, 1 patient out of every 10 is an eye patient. More immediately, a need that is evident, clearly evident, from the fact that during the past month, 1 patient out of every 7 who came to the UCLA clinics came here for eye care. In response to the challenge that is implicit in these statistics, this Eye Institute was created, designed as a comprehensive, integrated focus for education, research, and patient care. This facility contains technologically advanced outpatient, inpatient, and surgical facilities, educational aids including a comprehensive system of closed-circuit television and channels for the digital computers that seem destined to enter and enhance the traditional student-teacher relationship. To complete the spectrum, this institute contains a multi-categorical research facility designed to provide suites of facilities for the research workers skilled in the sciences of vision. To the faculty and to the staff of this institute, this facility represents an opportunity to teach, to render care, and to conduct research. The benefits derived from this opportunity can be determined and judged only in the future. It is pertinent, however, to recall the advice given by John Hunter, the leading English surgeon of the 18th century, to Edward Jenner, a country practitioner. Advice that prompted Jenner to perform a series of experiments and led to the control of smallpox by vaccination. John Hunter simply said, try, be patient, be accurate. As this institute changes from construction to operation, let me assure all who have made this possible of our dedication to its future and of our commitment to try, to be patient, and to be accurate.
As a close friend of Dr. Stein, Robert E. McCormick has learned through personal experience that eye research was suffering from lack of public interest and support. Together, Mr. McCormick and Dr. Stein, greatly encouraged by Mrs. Stein, injected new life into a field which desperately needed leadership by founding in 1960 a new kind of voluntary foundation, Research to Prevent Blindness. I would like to have you meet him now, for he is also the important president of Research to Prevent Blindness. Would you stand, please, Mr. McCormick? Jules, I think we'll go ahead. Looks right, don't you think? Ladies and gentlemen, in spite of the fact that heaven itself seems to be moved by the compassion of the moment, I think we shall proceed with tears in our eyes as well. I now have the obligation and the privilege of presenting to you Dr. Jules Stein. There is much that I could say about him, his extraordinary life, his training as an ophthalmologist and a physician in Chicago, the need to earn his way through medical school by playing an instrument, somewhat better in those days, I assume, than he does today. The relationship of Dr. Stein to the development of a great enterprise in corporate terms, which still continues to grow and develop. Through this period of time, Dr. Stein never forgot his dedication to, commitment to, and I would say loyalty to the profession of medicine out of which he first sprung. Through the years, he has retained his interest in the field of medicine and ophthalmology, and in the process has retained and extended his friendships throughout the world of ophthalmology. An example of this extension of relationship and continuing interest is with us today in visible and exciting form. For we have with us a distinguished representative of the world ophthalmological community. Professor Norman Ashton is not only a great and good and interested friend of Dr. Stein, he is director of the Department of Pathology, the Institute of Ophthalmology, and of Moorfields Eye Hospital in London, the oldest hospital for ophthalmology in the world. I present him to you not only as a distinguished representative of the ophthalmological community, but as a great, I repeat, and good friend of Dr. Stein. Dr. Ashton.
Chancellor Murphy, ladies and gentlemen, I have been asked to speak on this great occasion in the history of ophthalmology simply because, as an Englishman, I can represent the historical link between this modern marble palace of eye research beginning its life today and Moorfields Eye Hospital, born in London over 150 years ago and still looking much the same. For when Doctors Delafield and Rogers, returning from England, founded the New York Eye and Ear Infirmary in 1820 on the same lines as Moorfields, we became the spiritual ancestors of all the subsequent eye hospitals and eye institutes in America, and very proud and even doting ancestors we are. It therefore gives me the greatest pleasure to bring you at this dedication ceremony the warmest good wishes of the staff of Moorfields and of its associated Institute of Ophthalmology and of its president, Sir Stuart Duke Elder. Indeed, I am charged by the Ophthalmological Society of the United Kingdom to convey to you the congratulations of British ophthalmology as a whole. I don't know who was the original Aladdin here, who rubbed the lamp of learning to materialize the very genial genie, Mr. Jules Stein. But he was certainly a genius. That is, as regards American ophthalmology. For I see in this elegant and gracious architectural triumph yet another siren voice, perhaps the most seductive of all, to entice away our young scientists from Europe. But I may tell you that Mr. Jules Stein, Chairman of Research Against Blindness, is now doing great things for us in London in helping with our appeal for research funds. So the bread that Moorfields cast upon the waters so long ago is returning after many days. Now, as Mr. Jules Stein had in his pre-dedication address emphasized this link between British and American ophthalmology, and as a member of Moorfields staff today, I was asked to read his address to you. Now, these are his words that he spoke 2 years ago. On March the 25th, 1805, in a tiny building in Charterhouse Square, London, the first public eye hospital opened its doors. Originally known as the London Dispensary for the Relief of the Poor afflicted with eye and ear disease, and subsequently, rather fortunately, called Moorfields Hospital, this small infirmary was established in response to an obvious and critical need. The troops of Britain, France, and other European nations returning from the Napoleonic Wars in Egypt and the Middle East, had brought back with them a terrible eye disease whose devastating effects were to spread like a pestilence throughout Europe. Egyptian ophthalmia, as it was called by the physicians of that day, is today identified as trachoma, the leading cause of blindness in the world, and its prevalence continues to plague the people of the Eastern Hemisphere. Today, you who have contributed toward building the Jules Stein Eye Institute are moving to meet a challenge as immediate and critical as any in the field of medicine, and as great as was met by ophthalmologists in England at that time. For more than 3 million Americans suffer from serious non-corrective visual defects. Almost 1 million cannot read a newspaper even with the aid of glasses. Some 350,000 among us are declared legally blind. And while the tools of modern medicine are extending the lifespan and giving life to thousands who would once have died in infancy, the rate of blindness continues its alarming upward climb. Your answer is far more assertive than that of the confused and desperate physicians of London in 1805. Within the Eye Institute at UCLA will be amassed here the total product of man's knowledge and ingenuity as developed since that time in defense of the blessing of sight. To this place will come tens of thousands of patients who experience the terrible threat of the loss of vision. For them, the future will be more hopeful than it has ever been for those so afflicted, for they will find here a center in which knowledge and understanding of their ills have attained the highest degree of effectiveness. As we look today upon this institute, now a reality, it is possible to foresee the start of another great step in human progress. Just as a new approach to the science of ophthalmology was born out of the tragedy of the sudden appearance of trachoma in the West, so has it attained maturity in the concept of this institute. You have played a special role in making this day possible, in helping provide the financial resources for the construction and equipping of this magnificent building. You have earned the gratitude of many people. But the deepest gratitude will never be expressed, nor can it be. It will be found in the eyes of those who live after us, who drink in the visual beauties of life without fearing that loss of vision, and who may say to themselves in momentary acknowledgement of this magnificent gift, "It is wonderful to see."
Dr. Ashton, you do us great honor for coming all the way from London for this purpose, and we are deeply grateful. Most of you know Jules Stein. Those of you who do not know him personally, I suspect know him by reputation, and many will know him increasingly through time by virtue of his extraordinary act of generosity which has made possible this enterprise. Those of us here in UCLA have got to know him very well indeed these past several years. Those of you who knew him in the corporate context recall certain characteristics: energy, insistence, a certain kind of unique determination, and a capacity to appear when least expected but most needed. As I say, you've understood this in the corporate context, perhaps even in the entertainment context. We've felt the effect of these talents in an entirely different one. The analogy was made earlier that someone must have discovered the secret of rubbing the geni, Dr. Stein. Well, these days in UCLA, after the creation of this building, we've begun to wonder who's been rubbing who, and the hardest. But regardless of the technique of massage and who was masseur and who was product, it is a fact that together we have created this great enterprise. It goes back to the early days of conceptualization. It goes back to the cooperation and working together of Mr. Beckett and his associates, Dr. Stein and Mrs. Stein. It goes back to their constant insistence, on the one hand, that this be in technical and educational terms second to none, but also their consistent determination that there be an element of style and beauty in relation to it. And I'd like for one brief moment to take note of the symbolism of the building in this relationship. I myself believe, and some of you have heard me say it, even repeatedly, that the society has got to get interested in something other than utility and efficiency. That you cannot build beauty in the presence of simply hardware, or in many aspects of our society, ugliness. The beauty of spirit, the beauty of commitment is somehow related to beauty of environment and dedication to taste. For without taste and without a preoccupation with it, all of the mechanical things in the world are simply but empty vessels. And one of the things that this university appreciates most about this building is the fact that it is not only efficient, but it is both beautiful and tasteful. Before I introduce specifically Dr. Stein, however, I would like to introduce a person whom you also all know, a person who will not play a very vocal part of the programs over the next 2 or 3 days, but without whom very considerable aspects, important aspects of this enterprise, in my view, would simply not be present. Doris Stein. Doris, would you say? And now, ladies and gentlemen, corporate and financial genius, entrepreneur, ophthalmologist, and our good friend, Dr. Jules Stein.
Chancellor Murphy, Regents of the University of California, all my wonderful friends and contributors and associates in the audience, needless to say, this is a wonderful day for me. It is with much pleasure and a deep sense of pride that I stand with you today before this building, which the Regents of the University of California have so generously named in my honor. This edifice represents the efforts and talents of many people, the work of many minds and hands brought together to create an eye institute to serve mankind for years to come. Our primary objective in building this institute has been to serve the needs of medical science and medical practice. We've sought first to create a completely functional building, a comprehensive institute in which the most advanced eye research, treatment, and training will be totally integrated. At the same time, Mrs. Stein and I wish to demonstrate that all these purposes can be served within an atmosphere of grace and beauty. We are convinced that the eye research scientist works far more effectively when he is freed from the inhibiting influence of too little space and inadequate equipment. We have sought to place all the resources of advanced therapy in the hands of the clinicians, nurses, and others who will serve the thousands who will come to this place with hope that their sight may be preserved or restored. We have incorporated in this institute all the tools of modern teaching so that today's most advanced medical knowledge and skills may be passed on to men and women who will leave here fully equipped to carry on the work of preserving sight. I am deeply grateful to the many generous contributors, to the faculty and staff of the University of California, and to all the other people who have shared the hard work and the satisfaction of constructing this institute. What we have done indicates that we, all of us, are not content to accept the loss of sight as an unalterable act of nature. Blindness is one of man's oldest afflictions and one of the most feared. A Gallup survey recently indicated that fear of blindness among the American people is second only to the fear of cancer and far greater than the fear of heart disease or crippling conditions. This fear of blindness is justified because throughout the world, and here in our own nation, blindness is a major cause of physical disability. Few people realize the enormous dimensions of the problem and how rapidly it is growing. More than 1 million people in the United States have no useful vision. Some 100,000 major operative procedures are performed on the eyes each year. And with each year, the need for ophthalmic service increases. Here at the University of California Center for Health Services, there were 15,700 patient visits to the ophthalmological clinic during the fiscal year ending June 30th. That's an average of over 1,300 a month. In the first 3 months of this year, the average eye patient visits have risen to almost 1,600 patients a month. As the patient load has increased, eye patients have been treated under increasingly difficult conditions. Here, as in most hospitals throughout the country, demands for ophthalmic services have outgrown the facilities, and both patients and physicians have had to sacrifice much in personal convenience to maintain excellence in eye care. With the opening of the Eye Institute, it is expected that in the first year of its operation, more than 25,000 eye patients will be served, and under the most favorable conditions that modern medical science can provide. In helping to create this facility, the largest eye institute ever built at one time in the world, we have begun to meet the critical needs that must be met if the sight of this nation is to be preserved. And we are beginning to provide answers to a question that we should continue to ask ourselves today and every day until blindness is conquered. Why must we wait for people to go blind before we do something about it? This institute is an important step in the right direction. I predict that in a short time, we will see other ophthalmic centers springing up in Southern California to meet the growing needs of its people. We have set a high standard here, and its influence will be felt not only in ophthalmology, but throughout other fields of medical science. Our country is not properly equipped today to serve the many thousands whose vision is in jeopardy, nor is it equipped to carry out a concerted program of advanced eye research. Across the entire nation, we see the unfortunate results of inadequate facilities for research, treatment, and the training of specialists in ophthalmology. The national organization, of which I am fortunate to be chairman, Research to Prevent Blindness, is acting to meet these long neglected needs. It has become a moving force in the construction of laboratory buildings for eye research in other parts of the nation, just as it has played a major role in the creation of this center. Last year, a major eye research building was dedicated at Johns Hopkins University as a project of research to prevent blindness. And at this time, 2 other major facilities are in advanced stages of development at the University of Louisville and at Columbia University in New York. We believe it imperative that the level of eye research be raised to the high position it must have in medical science to effectively reduce the continued and alarming increase in blindness. Research to Prevent Blindness is strengthening the eye research programs of some 30 institutions across the country with unrestricted grants to explore new ideas and concepts. It is building trained manpower for eye research and attracting gifted scientists to this field with professorship grants and manpower awards. We are working continuously with legislators to encourage a far greater federal investment in eye research than the inadequate amounts now allocated to this branch of medical science. We also think it is imperative that the Congress recognize the urgent need for the separate National Eye Institute within the National Institutes of Health and we are working toward that objective. All these activities represent a beginning. It is important that we have begun, but it is far more important that we increase the pace of what we are doing and grasp the numerous opportunities now exist for the advancement of eye research. I'm happy that we have been able to build this institute, and I'm very proud that it bears my name. But far more important than the bricks and mortar, however beautiful, is the work that will be done here. Many of the greatest advances in medicine have had their origin in the science of ophthalmology. The presence today here of the many distinguished scientists who are attending the Institute's inaugural scientific program attests to the vigorous growth of activity in this field, which has seen more progress in the past 4 decades than in the previous 1,000 years. The men and women who will occupy this building and use its resources will share in future achievements that will outstrip any that have been seen in the past. For science today is moving ahead with fantastic speed, and we must be sure that eye research moves with it. The history of this institute begins with this dedication. I am confident that it will be a proud history, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity that has been given me to be a part of it.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have now concluded the formal dedication of this building. I would like to add at this moment parenthetically that in a certain sense today the building is transferred to the care of the university and to the responsibility of the regents of the university. Although I might add, I suspect Mr. Stein will continue to be sort of resident manager for a good many weeks and months to come. I wish that it were possible for me, on behalf of the university, to express our deep gratitude to all of you in the audience who have joined with Mr. Stein, Dr. Stein, in making this building possible. For I see faces, familiar ones, and I've also seen lists, familiar ones. And the faces match the lists in most instances in an extraordinarily generous way. We're deeply grateful to all of you who have made it possible. I'm now going to ask Mrs. Stein to come forward to cut the ribbon and thus open the building to all of us here present. You will at this moment or soon have the opportunity, which I urge you to seize, to take a guided tour of the Institute. The tours are being led by resident physicians and our student hostesses, and they start from this west entrance, which incidentally is not the main entrance as to the future. To avoid congestion, and in the name of the great Southern California tradition of traffic control, we would invite guests wearing white identification badges to go on the initial tours and have their refreshments, and parenthetically may I say the refreshments are authentic, in the tent over here afterward. Meanwhile, those wearing yellow tags we invite to have their refreshments first and join the later tours. Guests who are attending the inaugural scientific program are asked to visit the Institute tomorrow. There will be an identical tour for this group tomorrow afternoon, beginning at 4:30. And finally, after the ribbon is cut, I would ask the handsome young ladies in the back, the Bruin Bells, to come forward before the audience stands in order that they can get in place. And now, Mrs. Stein, will you please cut the ribbon so we may conclude these formal dedication exercises?
Ready. Okay, cut it, pass it.